Hi, my name's Justin Odisho, and this is a library tour. This is not every single book I own. I have a Kindle and other stuff like that, but this is most of them. Let's address, have you read all of these? Obviously not, of course not, and probably some of them I will never read or get to in my life, but the point is that they're all stuff that I am interested in reading. It has been a few years since I've organize them, so I'm sure there's also maybe 10% of books that I could use to get rid of or are not really that interesting anymore. Yeah, as far as having a large library, as long as you're interested in everything in there, it's not financially or spatially a burden, I don't see why it has to be justified so harshly. I also think the first impression of asking if you've read all those is not the correct way to go about it, because I view it more like food for thought, I guess. It's not going to expire like food in the refrigerator, but it's there for when you're hungry. I also don't think that you have to read everything. And I'm also well aware of famous quotes like Schopenhauer saying people who read too much basically are intellectually lazy and they're letting other people do the thinking for them rather than living. I personally, at the end of the day, think reading is a very productive and meaningful thing. And so if I can share that with other people, I think that's productive. Yeah, I moved stuff around. I probably have done the bulk of my buying. Like some years ago, I was in a really buying phase and my appetite was bigger, obviously, than my time available. Another thing, like Schopenhauer said, when we buy books, we imagine that we're buying the time that it takes to read them as well, which obviously we're not. And I have slowed down significantly on buying. Like now I guess I have to do the work of reading, basically. And I guess we can just start at the top. So like I said, these are not organized in some perfect fashion. And since I moved them around, some stuff is absolutely not where it should be. But why don't we just start in this top shelf here? So this is like some science type of things. Maybe I'll jump around too since things are not organized. But lots of stuff on evolution, origin of life mixed in here. I guess the psychedelic stuff, like this is a book I've read, Doors of Perception. But the Terence McKenna lectures that online that you can read, they're sort of like rambling, psychedelic, philosophical ramblings, I'm almost going to say. I found really interesting. There's also the whole like stoned ape theory of evolution. Also, there was this book, I'm jumping way ahead now, by Towlin called Trip that talks a lot about Terence. That's why I got into that, because he said he was listening to that a lot. But anyways, we're going to get back there. Yeah, that's another thing I have a little book club playlist online. You know, my main gig online is teaching video editing. This is just sort of like personal hobby. But yeah, the kind of disappointing thing about this is the topic of many books, like we're going to get into here, is usually stuff that you're not supposed to talk about, like religion and politics, controversial stuff. It's kind of difficult sometimes. Me personally, I am more of a private person, which is funny because if I was really a private person, like I have thousands of videos online. But personally, I don't really have social media besides for this sort of productive business outlet. But yeah, it's just sort of a difficult line to toe. And I respect those people that do boldly talk about like controversial stuff. So yeah, so the top, some science, economics, but continuing on, like a lot of this is going to be religious stuff, and not just one religion, but some of these are interesting. Like I got really into a rabbit hole. I found this actually at a thrift store. It must have been some sort of like theological student with a bunch of how to read New Testament Greek and other things about Greek. But I find language and translation very interesting, like the etymology of what things mean. Yeah, I was really interested in studying that. My beginnings of my journey to becoming more literate, I guess you could say, religious literacy. Skipping a little bit, because this sort of goes along with that, this is all like some more origin of life stuff, like Darwin and other things, but also the historical figure of Jesus. Then we have a whole philosophy section. Like I was saying, books that maybe I will never read in like 5 or 10 years, but they seemed important to have so that maybe I one day could. Yeah, but I hope to get to them. Skipping up one though, we do have, this is probably where I should have started, like Plato, Homer, Greek mythology, Greek history, Herodotus. I have read a decent amount of these, so like Plato's Republic. I haven't read every single bit of Plato, but it was nice to have this nice complete works just as a reference. Also the complete plays of Aristophanes. I've read a few of these, and it's actually surprising how funny some of them are. And this also has further reference to Socrates. This is one of the references to Socrates outside of just Plato for the debate on whether Socrates was a real person or not. I'm just interested in all of this stuff. Obviously, there's like the whole Stoicism stuff. I've made a review of Meditations. If you want to check that out on my channel, I was reading through some of this, but obviously you could probably just spend a lifetime just on focusing on the ancient Greeks and still not fully scratch it all. Maybe the one downside for me being such a vast scope of things is you're more of a generalist. I honestly still have to get to Homer, which is sad. Aesop's Fables are actually kind of interesting to read. I enjoyed reading through some of them. But we're going to skip over a bit now. I think we made it through those. The bottom is pretty unorganized, just random stuff. I'm a huge Jeff Buckley historian, actually. He's my Elvis. I know everything about him, probably. There's more biographies later, but I find him a really interesting artist. Not only the whole tragic passing, but like him and his dad, it's almost like a real life Shakespearean tragedy that you can't even write as well as it is. And I just personally like the scope of his music. You can actually find a collection of his books online, like the books of his library, somewhere on his website. I think there's a cataloging of the records and books he had before he died. We got Nassim Taleb, which was also kind of turned into a meme on Twitter. I do enjoy some of his books. I haven't finished these, as you see, but I find his writing a bit insufferable, but yet some of his insights are still funny. Not funny, but some of his insights are still valid. And I think he's the one that actually mentions Umberto Eco's principle of having a large library. History of Western philosophy, and these are a lot of philosophy. Nietzsche, I don't know how to pronounce it still to this day, but I did read Beyond Good and Evil and get into reading some of it, but I think I still need to run back around the history of philosophy a bit. Oh, so up here is more like science-y stuff. Some more science fiction, Snow Crash. I got into studying money a lot, Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. This was interesting, Tesla's My Inventions. Talks about in here being able to like mentally imagine solutions to things. Oh no, actually I think this was the book with the crypto money. Not Snow Crash, but I can't recall. I read a bit of Snow Crash. I'm not really a huge sci-fi guy, but yeah, a lot of these things and others are going to be about money and what is money. At the end of the day, money is not real, but we're going to just skip past that. Here we have a lot of poems, and like I said, things are not organized as much as they used to be. Patterson, this actually got turned into a film, which I kind of enjoyed. It was just sort of nothing really happens, but William Carlos Williams, I think I just randomly picked up I picked this one up randomly one day, and I kind of liked his poetry. It's just kind of easy to get, and it feels very calming to me. And a lot of the time when I was first getting into books, I found poetry a bit obscure, and I didn't understand how to even appreciate it. But I think this is one where it's kind of easy. You get it. It just paints a kind of calm picture. A lot of classics, stuff that you hear good things about and you feel like you should read and you want to get to. This was interesting. I think this is also something like Jeff Buckley had in his collection. But this has the dual edition, French and English. There's a poem in here I really like, but he died pretty young, I think, which is interesting that you could create influential work at such a young age. Let's see, poetry and plays. A lot of these are going to be plays. Some books on writing and on reading poetry, like I was saying. Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. I got into a big side rabbit hole, which is actually on chess, but I will maybe make a separate video on my chess books. But it's actually funny how many books reference chess in some way. Like this book can be demonstrated through a chess game supposedly, and like some Nabokov that we'll get to later. Nabokov, I don't know. And then we have stuff that you have to have, like Dante and Shakespeare. I started the Inferno, but I haven't got to it. I hope I can actually say some insightful stuff in this video, not just I have these books and I've never read them. I did read King Lear, and I have the complete Shakespeare, but you can't really lug that around everywhere. So there's some that I just have the more portable editions of that I had. Hamlet, stuff that you have to go back to. And then Harold Bloom. I actually found this at a library sale, and the interesting thing about this is that it's signed by Harold Bloom. But I think he's like controversial for upholding the Western canon, as you see this book here. I do like that this book here has at least a list of a bunch of books that he considers canonical. So moving on now, it's going to get really random, I think, because a lot of these are going to start to get more unorganized. some books on film and film history, because my main gig online, like I said, is video editing and video and stuff like that. So I thought I would try to acquaint myself with that. We have a lot of Japanese novels, like some Mishima books. I did read a few Mishima books. I've read this one. I read Confessions of a Mask recently, which I thought was interesting and even funny at some points, even though it's not supposed to be funny. I've read No Longer Human, which was, I don't want to say a page turner, but it was easy to read in a few sittings, and also interesting psychological, sort of depressing, but interesting novel. Let's go back though, we'll get there. Again, other books that you hear all the time being considered like the greatest books or greatest American books that I have not gotten to yet, but I would like to. I actually did a review of this one on my channel. This is from a video editor. Also, speaking of film and books, I just saw this, and a lot of these have been made into movies, obviously. I was on an airplane the other day, and there's this funny trend online about raw dogging the flight, as in like just staring at the back of the seat. And I honestly think just staring at the back of the seat, obviously like not literally, like there's people on the plane that are watching 4 movies in a row or 5 movies in a row. And I feel like that takes much more work. And I also feel like movies in general sort of are surface level pleasure. There's like hardly any movies that really stick with you, or even films that really stick with you, whereas books just last. And obviously not every book is good. Some books stink, but the point I'm trying to make is like you watch a movie and you forget about it like the next week. All these movies we've watched, even though it's pleasurable in the moment, but you might read a book and never forget about it. This is probably the longest book I've ever read. It was almost just like the challenge of climbing a mountain, Count of Monte Cristo. I know this one doesn't look right, but I read the paperback version. I will say I see why there's an abridged version. The first bit of the story, really good, awesome stuff, like revenge, escape, classic stuff. But then there's long stretches of stuff in the middle that just like are forgettable, I guess you could say. I mean, it was written in a serialized way, I think, so almost like a TV show, but like week by week or month by month until it got so long. But the main plot is really interesting. I don't actually know what was abridged or not in the abridged version, but I don't regret reading it, but I don't know if I would want to read such a mountain of a book. Let's see. This one I really enjoyed. I did a review on my channel. You can check a video on that. And this is another book by Cortázar, which I haven't read, but the format is interesting. It's hopscotch, but you can read the chapters. Like there's a list in here. Like you go from 5 to 20, then chapter 2, then 12, and then you can go back and read it in a different order. And they're all like little vignettes, I think, that add up into a bigger story. But I really liked this magical slash philosophical short stories that he had. I found them all really interesting. I did make a story about that, or make a video about those. Some other stuff down here, more stuff about religions. These are sort of big books. Supple Leopard, that's if you like want to stretch, keep your back healthy. The Madness of Crowds, again, more like economic panic and stuff. Like I was saying with books I might be able to get rid of. Maybe I don't need all these books on virus outbreaks and things like that, but a lot of stuff on markets. And at one point I was doing a lot of things I shouldn't do financially. So this one I find really interesting, and to the credit of Nassim Taleb, talking about fractals. Like I said, like sometimes his writing is insufferable, but this is a cool book. And honestly, fractals just kind of blow your mind. I mean, there's actually an effect in After Effects called fractals, and I've made a video too on like video editing and math and the relation between them. But it's just really interesting that no matter how far you zoom out, I can't find it, but there's certain things even in nature, like how a river looks like a vein and how the universe looks like your brain nerves. There's a picture you'll see, or like the stems on a leaf look like also the river, like the flow of water from a river to a larger body. I mean, it sounds a little woo-woo, but if you really think about it, there's some sort of weird fractal organizing, like common thread throughout of everything. And sometimes it can blow your mind, I think, if you just think about it. If I went down a huge rabbit hole with what is money and all of that, which I think is an interesting rabbit hole, actually. But like I said, money is not real. Yeah, more stuff that I probably shouldn't even have payment systems in the US. More Nassim Taleb stuff, which I have read actually a good bit of. Good airplane reading maybe, but like I said, be warned, his writing is a little bit pompous sounding and kind of annoying. Yeah, more money. This is really interesting, I think, like the prime obsession. So the unsolved problems in mathematics, and I think there's 7 or something millennium problems that are unsolved. Like if you can solve them, you can get a $1 million reward or something. There's even that guy that he solved one of them and refused the prize and just lives sort of in obscurity. Mastery by George Leonard. I do like the one quote from here about how like mastery is about loving the process of practice. Shout out to Sean G, fellow YouTuber. I actually met him in New York. He does like workout stuff, fitness, fit over 50 and motivational stuff, but he's a really nice guy. I had him on my podcast and I ended up watching his channel very regularly just as I was making my morning coffee. Here we have a lot of Library of America editions. Library of America publishes these nice hardcover of American authors, obviously, and there's multiple novels in one edition, nice acid-free paper, and there's always like a little bookmark ribbon in them. I'd rather have one nice compact version than 20 different paperbacks sometimes. Some language stuff. I studied some Spanish in high school. I like Spanish and being able to sort of barely speak a little bit of it. Latin, I think because of how much comes from Latin. And then skipping forward, we have Jorge Luis Borges. I really enjoy also his mystical, sort of magical short stories, but also he has nonfictions and poems. The fictions, obviously, I think maybe is what he's most famous for. And what I've read, I really enjoyed some of those ones. They're sort of like the Cortázar blow up. I don't really know the time frames there. Obviously, Fight Club. That's maybe one where the movie is just as memorable as the book, but is it really that classic of a book? I don't know. And here's maybe a problem. I have almost every Cormac McCarthy novel, a lot of them, at least not every single one, but like many. And I've only read a bit of Blood Meridian and decided to wait because it was pretty good in the first chapter, but maybe I should start with The Road. This is a problem I've had ever since I was younger. Like even when I got my first iPod and I wanted to fill it with some music, I couldn't just put any music in there. I had to start with the entire discography of a certain band and start from the first album and then read that and then the EPs and the B-sides. I don't want to say I'm hoarding because I do want to read them, but it's some sort of thing I have where I have to do things in order and in an edited way. But I actually do want to read the Road. This is a cool first edition copy I found at a used bookstore for not that much. And this is his newest set, the box set, The Passenger and Stella Maris, which I think he passed recently too. Yeah, I know he passed recently. Next we have, like I was saying, this alt-lit stuff was a little internety books, but I found them interesting. I think in Fernando Pessoa he says if he could just read the Pickwick Papers once again for the first time or something, it would be the greatest pleasure. So that's why I was interested in that. B.S. Jobs. I haven't read this one, but the idea of it is interesting to me about how a lot of the economy is just like paper pushing and certain maybe like 20% of stuff is what's actually productive, which I do believe is going on, like lots of fake jobs, email jobs. Some of the Mishima, like I was saying, I actually read this Murakami Underground. I wasn't aware of these gas attacks that happened. That was kind of scary to read that, and the cults there. You think of Japan as a safe place, but I guess everywhere has their things. Oh, and yeah, like I said, a lot of these I bought or found secondhand, so sometimes it's like, did I really want this specific Murakami novel? No, but I saw it at a used bookstore for like $3 and it was worth it to me to have one day maybe. I read this. There's actually a film about this too. Normally I wouldn't read like random memoirs like this, but this one was actually really touching about this boy that gets lost. I mean, definitely look into it or watch the film. American Psycho and Bret Easton Ellis. I will say, out of everything I have, this has some of the most disturbing passages I've ever read, and I also think this is also another one where the film is really good, but some of the most disgusting passages I've ever read in that book there, but also some really funny moments. After the most disgusting description of some gory thing, it'll be like a long review of a record, like an album review, which is a funny contrast. Let's continue on. Up here we have some random stuff. Here we have a bunch of Penguin classics. They're kind of hard to tell the difference of. Like I said, Moby Dick. Yeah, I got through about the first, I don't even know, fifth. I got to get back to it. I did like it. I don't remember why I stopped. I think I got busy with some other things. That's the other problem with having so many books is like, I'm going to read this, then I'm going to read that. I think these are more Russian here. This is what I've been actually making some progress on. I read Crime and Punishment. I did a review of that by Dostoevsky. I really enjoyed it. Then I read The Idiot next, which was a lot more difficult to get through. I did enjoy it, maybe not as directly as Crime and Punishment, but I also made a video about that. I read the Notes from the Underground. That was kind of funny even. And I do want to read Brothers Karamazov probably pretty soon, just because, again, you hear, well, one, I liked Crime and Punishment a lot. Very moving, especially the ending. And you just hear that this is his greatest work, so I would like to get to it at some point in my life. But a lot of other Russian works, and like I was saying with chess and books, like Nabokov actually published chess problems. I don't know if anyone knows that. Of course, people know that, but I don't know if it's a common known fact. And he has a book called Poems and Problems, I think. And he also has another book called The Luzhin Defense, which was made into a movie as well, which is about a chess player. This was like some of the first stuff I was acquiring when I wanted to get into real reading, I guess you could say. But I haven't read it yet. But you have Ulysses, Allusions in Ulysses, and Ulysses Annotated, as well as this one. I don't know why I'm acting like it's going to be so daunting, but I have all those things. I have read like some bits and pieces of Finnegan's Wake. Like I was saying earlier with the Terence McKenna stuff, there's some interesting lectures he has about Finnegan's Wake and how like the first sentence and the last combine. And yeah, this is obviously not a book that I personally would ever really want to sit and read all the way through. It's a bit gobbledygook, but it is interesting. And I've definitely read a bit into it. I've read this book actually, Stoners, kind of like got really popular online. But it's actually about a guy who becomes a teacher. He comes from a more like rural background and then ends up becoming a teacher. And it's not like anything ever really goes too right in his life or that he has the happiest life and endings. But at the end of the day, his life still feels meaningful because he was able to invest time in reading and education and I can't remember exactly what, I don't want to say English, but like literature basically. And I find that a true message or relatable that this is like another life you can live aside from your own life through reading. These are all Barnes & Noble classics, which are not my favorite editions. They're kind of like thick paperbacks as opposed to those Library of America editions. But these are probably just things I found for like 25 cents at a thrift store once and are classics. More mishmash stuff. I actually liked this Phil Knight Shoe Dog. Again, like maybe a more random modern memoir from the founder of Nike, but I did sell shoes at one point. I worked as a shoe salesman at one point as an earlier job of mine, so maybe I thought it was interesting. And the Jeff Buckley stuff, like I said, Dream Brother. And then the rest here I'm going to go into in probably a separate video because it's too niche. But at this point, these are all chess books. I got really into chess and it's sort of my main focus that I'm reading at the moment and doing. It's like my main hobby. So I'll probably make a separate video, which also I've never made a video about on my channel, but it's been such a big thing that I've been thinking about making content about it. But yeah, I'm not quite good enough yet. Hopefully one day I can become an expert at least. There's like official titles, and maybe one day in my life master if I'm still interested. A few things though, there are some really interesting biographies and figures, even if you're not interested in the game, like the biography of Bobby Fischer, and also something there's been films made about, but just find him like really an interesting character. And like I said, the Nabokov book, and there's even like the Josh Waitzkin, like I think Tim Ferriss and him have done some podcasts, like he was a chess prodigy and then just sort of turned his life into other things. And also Paul Morphy, really interesting biography there too. It's interesting how a lot of these chess champions somehow seem to have gone crazy, like Morphy and Fischer. Through reading like the Morphy one, you even get some history of America in there too from back in their day. Yeah, like I was saying, the Tim Ferriss stuff. I mean, not something that I would read these days, but back when I was just starting my YouTube channel, I bought everything I could on business, those sort of self-help books, which I don't find that productive anymore. But I actually think a few things in here, like how to price online products and work for yourself, ended up kind of helping me and working for me a lot with what I ended up making a YouTube channel. These are just a few random things. Oh, these are the only Loeb classical libraries I have. I think green is for Greek and red is for Roman books, but these are Really nice little edition. And they have the original Greek on one side and the English translation on the other side. I mean, I'd love to have more of these. Yeah, these are just some random stuff that I have in a different area that are just easy to access. So yeah, if you enjoyed this library tour, let me know what you thought in the comments. Check out the rest of my book playlist if you'd like. Your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you guys maybe in a few years or in future book reviews.